just make sure the stream is running properly. Check the audios. Let me know if you hear any audio issues. 2 seconds. Let me just get something back up on the screen real quick. I'm almost there. 2 seconds. Yes, here we go, y'all. Alrighty, so I'm back in effects. And I've just been taking a moment to digest some of this information and to collect my thoughts about this meeting. And some observations. I've made some observations now that are pretty critical, and I want to share those with people, with my squad and everybody else that comes to hear this stream. Now, if you don't know me myself, I'm very much into politics. And I have some other things as well. But hey, Bev, there you go. All right, let me know how the audio sounds too as well if you can. And so I really like to, as a grown-ass man, make some critical analysis about international affairs, because these things affect our everyday lives. Believe it or not, what goes on in one place in the world affects your life. We're all interconnected. We're more interconnected than we have ever been. And just like things always are, that can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing, depending on how you do things and how well people cooperate and what cooperation means. Now, okay, good, nice and clear. Thank you. And this thing right here is very, very troubling, but you don't really hear, if you follow the media, you cannot expect the media to extrapolate all the real grimy dirt that is in this video right here. And they don't. The media should have come right out and said, who is this man? This man is a despot who doesn't even have elections in his own country. His country is in a state of emergency, which gives him a reason to not have an election, by the way. His country has more people in prison per capita than any other place on earth. Any other place on earth. He's got more people in prison per person than any other place on earth. But the key thing here, there's some other things. Bitcoin is the nation's national dollar. Why do you think that is? Sounds like it's an easy way for cartels, international cartels, and others to hide their money, to exchange money inside of the American continent, right? But the crazy thing that Americans need to think about even more, all of this you need to think about, but even more, Trump himself wants to create an emergency, a state of emergency, so he doesn't have to hold elections. Read between the lines, y'all. Read between the lines. It's very, very important that people read between the lines, because you are dealing with a full-fledged lunatic, Trump is, and he's going to try it. And you're not going to tell him that he's not going to try it, because he's going to try it anyway. And the more you try to tell him that he can't do it, he's going to even do it. Now, already this has shifted from taking American citizens, taking a person that's lawfully inside of the United States also. Because keep in mind, the law that they're using is a law. They have to go way back into the 1700s or something to try to abuse, to find a way to even circumvent Congress, to circumvent the judge's order, to get this man out of the country. Not the man I'm talking to, but not the man on the screen, but another victim. Let me pull his face up and let you know who I'm talking about, because I didn't even know a lot of these things. The same manner in which they got this young man from Maryland, who they claimed is a violent thug, a member of MS-13. He's never been convicted of one crime inside of the United States or El Salvador, folks. The person that they deported has never been convicted of, never been charged of a crime in the United States or in El Salvador. And yet he is being held in the most dangerous prison, being called a terrorist by this man to the left. Folks, Americans are in danger. And I don't know how many times I'm going to say this, but Americans really, I know a lot of Americans are waking up. A lot of Americans are hitting the street. But I'm telling you, this is a playbook, and these people mean you harm. They mean you grave harm. Trump does not want to have an election. He's talking about how he could run for a third term. No, that's not what it is. Think about all the crimes that have been committed under the Trump administration. Do you think his plan is really to just walk out of office peacefully this time? Do you really think that's his plan? Do you really think he's going to leave it up to you to prosecute him? Do you really think he's going to leave it up to the judges and all the people that are tired of his ass to prosecute him? Do you think he's going to risk that? Do you think Elon Musk is going to risk that? Okay, let's see. But let's hear some more of this, and then I'm going to pull up who they're talking about. I'm starting it midway. I'm not going to play the whole thing, obviously, but where it's, I don't want to miss the meat and potatoes either. So let's let it play. There's some interesting things, and I'm going to stop it along the way. And let me know what you think also.
But it's a shame. You're right. Isn't that a great question? Why doesn't the media? Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing
it's
great.
A crazy turnaround.
Christy, could you maybe say a couple of words about the border? How we're doing?
Yeah, it's just been absolutely phenomenal what a great leader can do. Clear direction. Our laws matter. We should only have people in our country that love us, and the Border Patrol and our ICE officers and law enforcement officers have done fantastic work. So we're proud of them. Now we just need to get the criminals and murderers and rapists and dangerous gang members and terrorist organizations out of our country. So, Mr. President Bukele, we thank you very much for your partnership.
Now, I'm going to stop it right here. Nowhere in this press interview does anyone say that the person that they're talking about has never been charged of a crime. And the way they're talking about him, no one in the media stops them and says, excuse me, this man has never been charged of a crime. Now check this out. Let me just take this one off. Where are we at here? Is it this one? Is it this? Here we go. Let's go over to Chat GDP for a second. Maybe you guys can see this. Let's see. Okay. Now, here we go. This is El Salvador. Okay. And right now, let me see. Let me go back. Right now, human rights organizations have raised serious concerns about the situation in El Salvador under President Nayib Bukele, particularly since the implementation of a state emergency. In 2022, aimed at combating gang violence, that's what he calls it. He says he's combating gang violence under this state of emergency. While these measures have led to no significant reduction in gang-related crimes, they have also resulted in widespread human rights violations. And guess what else? They haven't had an election since 2022, since he called this. You see, when was he elected? We're going to get into that. But he's a newly elected, by the way. But 2022 is how many years ago? That's 3 years. Can you have an election in a state of emergency? Just think about it. Key human right concerns: mass arrest and arbitrary detentions. Since the state of emergency began, over 85,000 individuals have been arrested, including more than 3,300 minors. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International report that many of these arrests were arbitrary, lacking poor evidence or due process. Detainees have faced prolonged detention without charges, and some have been subjected to torture and other ill treatment. Prison conditions and deaths in custody. El Salvador prison population has surged, making it the highest incarceration rate globally, with 1.7 of the population imprisoned. Globally, you have to work really hard. You have to fuck up really hard to have a bigger population than the U.S. per person. But in any case, they'd find a way to do it here. The Terrorism Confinement Center, CECOT, a mega prison, has been criticized for overcrowded and inhumane conditions as of March 2025. That's this month. At least 367 individuals have died in custody, raising concerns about the treatment of prisoners. Erosion of judicial independence. Sound familiar? President Bukele's administration has been accused of undermining democratic institutions by replacing constitutional court judges and the attorney general with loyalists. The consolidation of power has weakened checks and balances, raising alarms about the rule of law and separation of powers. Does it sound familiar? Suppression of civil liberties. The state of emergency has curtailed freedoms of expression, assembly, and association. Journalists, human rights defenders, and government critics have faced harassment, intimidation, and legal actions, creating a climate of fear and self-censorship. Sound familiar? Reproductive rights. El Salvador maintains a total ban on abortion with no exceptions, leading to the imprisonment of women who suffer miscarriages or obstetric emergencies. This strict policy has been condemned by the international human rights groups as a violation of women's rights. Sound familiar? While President Bukele's tough on crime approach has garnered domestic support for reducing gang violence, international observers caution that these measures have come at the expense of fundamental human rights and democratic principles. Now check this out. How much do you think somebody makes in El Salvador? $1 an hour. That's what people make at best. If you're lucky, you make $1 an hour, right? What do you think their major exports are? You know, look at this. El Salvador wages in a key export industry such as textiles, apparel, and manufacturing are relatively low, often falling short of covering basic living expenses. Minimum wage. As of 2024, workers in the textile and maquila sectors earn a minimum wage of $359 per month, which equates to approximately $1.48 per hour, $11 per day. Where do you think those goods are going to? Average salaries according to PayLab salaries in the sector typically range from 23 to 47 Salvadorian colones annually, which approximates about 2,000 to 5,000 yearly. Yeah, you people need to look into this. But here's the thing. This is even look exports. Top exports: knit or crochet apparel and accessories. This is basically like the you could say, one of the Asian nations that makes cheap products, right? Which people criticize child labor and things like this. Yeah. So people don't get paid a living wage in El Salvador, but who are they making these products for? But in any case, let me just get to one other question that's very important also, and that is the man who Trump sent to El Salvador. Has he been convicted or charged of any crime in the USA or El Salvador? Look, Maryland resident deported to El Salvador in March 2025 has not been charged or convicted of any crime in either the United States or El Salvador. This is key. This is key. They're running around telling you that this man is a gang leader, and they've never even charged him with a crime. He's never been convicted of a crime. Where's the proof? Where's the due process? Right? Where's the due process? And already the Trump administration has morphed from this act to now saying things like anyone who hates America can be deported. Now check this out. Check this out. Does Trump and the leader of El Salvador have any plans to hold other prisoners, other people sent from the USA that are not El Salvadorian citizens? Yes, recent agreements between Trump administration and El Salvador's president Nayib Bukele, I don't even know why they call him a president, indicates plan to hold individuals deported from the U.S. in El Salvador, including those who are not Salvadorian citizens. Key agreements. Safe Third Country Agreement. You see? In early 2025, that's this year, the U.S. and El Salvador discussed safe third country arrangements that allow the U.S. to deport non-Salvadorian migrants, such as Venezuelans, to El Salvador, where they would be expected to seek asylum. These approach aims manage asylum claims that by redirecting them to designated safe country. Detention of non-citizens. El Salvadorians have agreed to accept deportees from the U.S. of any nationality, including individuals accused of gang affiliations like MS-13 or Tren de Aragua. These individuals will be housed in El Salvador's mega prison. El Salvador has agreed to accept deportees from the U.S. of any nationality, including not only people they're claiming are gang members. Incarceration of U.S. citizens. President Bukele has offered to incarcerate convicted U.S. citizens and legal residents in El Salvador's prisons. While the proposal has been acknowledged by the U.S. officials, implementing such a plan would face significant legal challenges, but they're working on it. Was the man who Trump sent to El Salvador a USA citizen? And would these proposed agreements affect U.S. citizens in any way? Okay, Now, check this out. This is where it gets why I think people are confused about this. He's not a U.S. citizen, but he's a legal U.S. resident with a court protected status. He'd been granted withholding of removal by a U.S. immigration judge in 2019 due to credible fears of persecution in El Salvador. The man has never been charged or convicted of a crime in either nation. That means while he did not have full citizenship, he had legal permission to remain in the U.S. and could not lawfully be deported under that protection. His wrongful deportation in March 2025 was widely criticized by legal experts, immigrant advocates, and later by the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled deportation wholly lawless and ordered the government to facilitate his return. That means make it happen. In order that El Salvador refuses to comply with. Now, would these proposed agreements affect U.S. citizens? Yes, potentially and dangerously. While U.S. citizens cannot legally be deported, here's how the proposed Trump-Bukele arrangement could raise red flags. Well, we already heard he already agreed to hold U.S. citizens. Bukele, right, which is something all American citizens should be against, even convicted criminals. This doesn't make any sense. But we know how it's going to work out, though, or could. Garcia's case shows that even lawful U.S. residents can be mistakenly or deliberately deported under aggressive policies. This undermines due process protections and opens the door to wrongful exile, especially for immigrants with pending protected status. It could affect 12 million people that are not citizens right off the bat, but also U.S. citizens. Foreign incarceration of U.S. citizens. President Bukele has offered to incarcerate convicted U.S. citizens in El Salvador, something that would typically violate the U.S. law. There are no legal mechanisms for the U.S. to outsource incarceration of its own citizens to a foreign country, and doing so could raise major constitutional and human rights concerns. Why is Trump even entertaining the idea? Why doesn't he shut that down immediately? El Salvador's prisons now hold thousands of emergency powers. You see? Emergency powers. Expansion of detention without charges. El Salvador's prisons now hold thousands under emergency powers, often without charges. If similar logic were applied to U.S. deportees, including legal residents, they could be held indefinitely in extreme prison conditions without trial or formal charges, just based on alleged gang ties. Okay. Right. Now, here's another thing. Due process risk. Garcia's case shows how errors to deliberate overreach can bypass court protections. Civil rights advocates warn that U.S. citizens with previous criminal records or dual nationality could become targets, particularly if they are caught in mass deportation efforts and cannot immediately prove citizenship. Right? That's dual citizenships, dual citizens. Chilling effect on immigrant families. Many U.S. families are mixed status, meaning parents, children, and siblings may have differing legal status. These proposed agreements could destabilize families and put even citizens' children at risk if their caretakers are deported or imprisoned abroad. Right. Civil rights groups argue that such proposals, especially involving the incarceration of U.S. citizens abroad, violate constitutional rights and international laws. Now, I don't know how many people plan on risking their lives to support this, but the key thing is that they're not even attempting. This man was even detained improperly. His whole processing was against the law. So how many times have you been detained by the police? How many times have you been violated by the police? Do you want the next time that the police pick you up for any reason that you that you don't have an ID or they don't accept your ID, your ass can end up in El Salvador whether you're a U.S. citizen or not. That's what they're basically saying. That is what this is actually about.
It has been wonderful for us to be able to have somewhere to send the worst of the worst and someone to partner with. And we'd like to continue that partnership because it's been a powerful message of consequences. Mr. President, you wanted people to know that there was consequences if you break our laws and harm our people and endanger.
The man broke no law. He harmed no one. He's never been charged of breaking a law. He's never been convicted of breaking a law.
Families, and this is a clear consequence for the worst of the worst, that we have somewhere to put them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent, and we interviewed him just, to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, oh, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me.
So now he's telling a story about a gang member, but actually, that's not who they're talking about. The courts are talking about the one who has never been convicted and never been charged of a crime. The one who is not a gang member because they have never been proven to be anything of the such. Never been charged of anything of the such. And now he diverts to a completely different person.
6 times, so it should be released again. And then he said, well, but what's the last thing you do? And he said, well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg. And we're like, this guy was arrested 6 times here in the United States. 6 times. He was released 6 times. And in the he was released 5 times. And the last time he was sent to El Salvador, right? So he's not getting released. But the last time he shot a cop, actually, and he shot him in the leg. So these are, like you said, there's something broken.
It's the liberal establishment. But they're not running things anymore in this country, and we're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Because it's all common sense. Yeah. It's not liberal conservative, it's common sense.
Exactly.
And, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing.
That's violence.
That's abuse of a
violence
woman.
Against women.
It's abuse of a woman.
Totally.
But we have people that fight to the death because they think men should be able to play in women's sports. And some of those sports, it wouldn't matter much, but it still matters. But some of them are very dangerous for women.
Some years ago, I would say a decade ago or so, women rights movements were pressuring so that we enacted specific laws to avoid men abusing women. And I think those laws were great because there were a lot of men abusing women. But now some of the same people are trying to backtrack on that and actually trying to make new laws allowing men to abuse women in sports. So actually, that doesn't make sense.
In sports.
It doesn't make sense.
It's crazy. They have weightlifting records, right?
Yeah.
A woman gets up, lifts weights, she's incredible. A guy gets up and beats her by 100 pounds. What are you going to do? A record that hadn't been broken in 18 years. They put on an ounce, quarter of an ounce, eighth of an ounce. For 18 years now, they have a guy come up, ping. The whole thing is crazy. But they continue to fight. And I don't like talking about it because I want to save it for just before the next election. I said to my people, don't even talk about it because they'll change. And but I watched this morning, there was a congressman fighting to the death for men to play against women in sports. And you say to yourself.
Now, I just wanted to say that they did actually hold elections, right, during the state of emergency. But human rights advocates, they say that the state of emergency actually suppresses freedom of speech, suppresses right to assembly, suppresses dissent, political dissent, meaning opposition. So I just wanted to put that out there for.
Why? What are they doing, right? What are they doing? But your country's not too big in that.
No, of course not. We're big in protecting women.
We're good. Yeah. That's right. It's a very important form of protection, too.
And as you can see, Most of my cabinet are women, so.
That's impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why you're
And
running.
they're not DEI hires or anything.
They
They're
can
just
be
great
done.
at what they do, right?
That's right. This is very impressive.
Yeah,
This
no.
is a first. We've had women, but we've never had 3 of them right here. That's
4 and 3
And
men.
look what we have. You guys feel a little bit mistreated? That's good. I like it. Well, we've been advanced. I've been very advanced in that regard too. We have Pam, who's been so
Yes, I know.
fantastic.
Christie.
Now, this man right here that Trump is talking to, he's actually been accused of working with the cartels. Now let me just go back to this one real quick so you can see what this looks like here. Let me see here. I'm gonna let it play too as well.
Yes, President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador has faced serious allegations of negotiating with criminal gangs, and in one case, reportedly attempting to collaborate with a Mexican drug cartel. Alleged gang negotiations. Multiple investigations and reports have accused Bukele's administration of secretly negotiating with major Salvadoran gangs, including MS-13 and Barrio 18, to reduce homicide rates and secure political support. In 2020, the investigative outlet, El FARRA, reported that Bukele's government offered prison privileges and other benefits to gang leaders in exchange for a reduction in violence and electoral backing. The U.S. Treasury Department later sanctioned 2 top Salvadoran officials, Osiris Luna and Carlos Marroquin, for allegedly brokering these deals. The U.S. government alleged that Bukele's administration provided financial benefits and privileges to imprisoned gang leaders, including access to cell phones and other perks, to gain their support. In 2023, El Faro reported that Bukele's government allegedly offered $1 million to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, to abduct and return MS-13 leader Elmer Canales Rivera before the 2024 elections. Bukele's response. President Bukele has consistently denied these allegations, asserting that his administration has not negotiated with gangs. He has dismissed U.S. sanctions against his officials as politically motivated and accused critics of attempting to undermine his government's efforts to improve security. Legal and political implications. While Bukele himself has not been formally charged, the allegations have strained relations with international partners and raised concerns about the methods used in his administration's crackdown on crime. The reported negotiations with gangs and alleged dealings with a drug cartel have sparked debates about the rule of law and transparency in El Salvador. In summary, although President Bukele has not been officially charged, credible reports and investigations suggest that his administration has engaged in clandestine negotiations with gangs and attempted collaboration with a drug cartel, raising significant ethical and legal concerns.
What are the details of him being alleged to have worked with cartels and any others like the Mexican cartel? Which organizations? And do they use cryptocurrency to avoid money transactions being identified and the individuals transporting money? Let's see here. I'm just curious about this myself. That's what just comes into my mind automatically, when I think of this. But let's see here. Okay, it's still pulling up more information. 2 seconds. I'm going to let this play and then we can go back to it.
Christie and the most powerful woman they say anywhere.
I
in
know,
the world.
exactly.
She's rated.
They're all afraid of her.
Susie Wells, they say, oh, she's tough. Most most powerful woman in the world, according to magazines. What do I know?
Yes.
But I think she probably is.
Yeah, she probably is.
She probably is.
Congratulations.
And Stephen, who's done such a great job.
Yes.
We have great
He's
people.
very famous too.
But we love working with him. He really lets them have it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no games.
No. It's very good.
He knows. Do you have any questions, please? Go ahead. Let's not start with
What's-
CNN because they're
What is
just so.
interesting here is that you got to keep in mind he's talking to the president of the United States. They know everything about these allegations, and they know everything about what the fact that the Biden administration refused to meet with him. He actually came to the United States on his own without an invitation, and the Biden administration refused him because of many of these human rights violations and this idea of access to the cartels and things like that, right? But but Trump got no problem meeting with him at all, and sending American citizens there also, if need be. So let's see what they say about the cartel activity.
Yes, President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador has faced credible allegations of engaging with criminal organizations, including Mexican drug cartels, and facilitating money laundering through cryptocurrency channels. Allegations of cartel collaboration. In 2023, investigative reports revealed that Bukele's administration allegedly offered $1 million to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, to abduct and return MS-13 leader Elmer Canales Rivera, Crook, before the 2024 elections. This operation was reportedly orchestrated by high-ranking Salvadoran officials, including Osiris Luna and Carlos Marroquin, who were previously sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury for negotiating with gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18. These negotiations purportedly involved offering prison privileges and financial incentives to gang leaders in exchange for reduced violence and political support. Such actions have drawn international criticism and raised concerns about the rule of law in El Salvador. Cartels and cryptocurrency. Used transnational criminal organizations, including the CJNG and Sinaloa cartel, have increasingly adopted cryptocurrencies to launder illicit proceeds. These groups exploit unregulated exchanges and the anonymity of digital currencies to move funds across borders without detection. For instance, the CJNG has been reported to use platforms like Binance to transfer millions of dollars derived from drug trafficking activities. Similarly, the Sinaloa cartel employs bulk cash-to-crypto pipelines, often involving Chinese brokers, to facilitate international money laundering operations. These practices complicate law enforcement efforts, as tracking cryptocurrency transactions requires specialized tools and international cooperation. Implications and concerns. The alleged collaboration between Bukele's administration and criminal organizations, coupled with the use of cryptocurrencies for money laundering, poses significant challenges. Erosion of legal institutions. Engaging with criminal entities undermines the integrity of governmental institutions and the rule of law. Human rights violations. The crackdown on gangs has led to mass incarcerations, often without due process, raising human rights concerns. International relations. Such actions strain El Salvador's relationships with international partners, particularly the United States, which has expressed concern over these developments. In summary, the intersection of political actions, alleged cartel collaborations, and the utilization of cryptocurrencies for illicit activities in El Salvador highlights a complex and troubling scenario that warrants close international scrutiny.
So, in short, they're using essentially crypto to get around, their activities. If you can't track who is sending what money, then you just can't do anything about it, right? You're free to, for criminals are free to exchange goods, essentially, right? Untraceable. Now, Trump is supposed to be wanting to know about these things, but Trump obviously doesn't want to know a damn thing about it. He's not concerned about it. He's more concerned with, I found a crook. Now let me get him to help me. Let me get him to help me commit human rights violations against American citizens and also legal residents who have never been charged with a crime and never have been proven to committed a crime, never been convicted of crimes, to circumvent the law. And he's even offering to accept U.S. citizens. He's even offering to accept U.S. citizens to be held in his prisons. I mean, it doesn't take much to figure out that he would basically do anything. Bukele will basically do anything. That's why he's so comfortable sitting, chatting it up, smiling with Trump, another individual who's basically willing to do anything. I mean, this is scary. I'm going to play a couple more minutes of this so we can hear some of the rhetoric, and then I'm going to go to the next topic, which is
Wrong. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
which is the demonstrations.
President. You repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake? And have you given Putin a deadline to actually move toward a ceasefire?
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel. But I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war. But you wouldn't have had it with me anyway. That war would have never happened.
How does the president of the United States lower oil prices? How does he do that in a free trade democracy? Is he the one that's supposed to lower oil prices? What does he have, a magic pen where he says, hey, you companies are going to lower oil prices? Is he saying an executive order? Or is he saying Congress and the Senate should deal with oil companies and price gouging? Isn't that what Kamala Harris and Biden were talking about? Isn't that what they asked Congress to look into? Price gouging, not just oil companies, but other companies exploiting the crises, exploiting the situation of COVID. The U.S. just got over COVID. So, but the prices didn't come back down. That was the issue. So is he saying that Biden should have made an executive order, or is he saying that Congress should have acted? I'm not understanding this. And by the way, Congress can act right now if they're worried about prices of oil, if they're worried about prices of goods. Congress can act. And what does Congress have to say about Trump's tariffs? I mean, we all have to keep these things in mind when we're listening to Trump. But let's hear some.
And I think it's a great abuse. So now what do? You get a country
What's up,
where
Don?
25% of its land is gone and the best locations, where millions of people are killed. You haven't reported accurately the death. And this was Biden's war, and I'm trying to stop it. And I think we're going to do a good job. I hope we're going to do.
Look, this guy can't get, he can't get the president, quote unquote, of El Salvador to return not an American citizen, but an American resident who's never been charged of a crime in the United States or El Salvador. He can't even force the man to return him. And he's talking about what Biden couldn't do by force. What is this dude talking about? Look, he's talking to a man whose people get paid. The man who's sitting to the left, Bukele, people, if they're lucky, on a good day, get $1 an hour for work, which doesn't even pay for the expenses that they have. El Salvadorians are living in poverty. What economy do they have? Sewing, small trinkets and manufacturing, small things, and they're paying people $1 an hour. What's the national currency? Bitcoin. And this man can't get them to return one person. You could see this is just a complete utter charade.
They lose 2,500 young people a week, think on average. Now they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, but it's 2,000. We don't care. It's like whatever it is.
Intolerable.
They're not from your country. They're not from mine. But I want to stop it. 2,500. It's a killing field. It's like the Civil War. You take a look. I look at the satellite pictures. This should not be happening in our time. Of course, our time can be pretty violent, as we know. But that's a war that should have never been allowed to start. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have.
And you could have stopped the dude from being deported. He's not even legally deported. I don't even know why people even use the term. They could have stopped the man from being kidnapped from American soil and brought to El Salvador. He's not a criminal. He's never been charged of a crime, Garcia, and he's never been convicted of a crime in El Salvador or in the United States. But Trump is not strong enough to make the El Salvadorian president do it. The man said, no, I won't return him to Trump's face. Trump is the president of the most powerful single nation on earth and wealthiest. And this man is the president of the poorest and most insignificant nation on earth. I mean,
never started it. Everybody's to blame.
I'm not dissing El Salvadorians. I'm just saying that's how it is.
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles. You know, he's against. Listen.
Anyway, let's get back to the topic.
Largely destroyed.
You see how they
Putin number one.
Through the FBI investigation behind the attack on Governor Josh Shapiro over the weekend.
No, I haven't. But the attacker was not a fan of Trump. I understand, just from what I read and from what I've been told. The attacker basically wasn't a fan of anybody. It's probably just a whack job. And certainly a thing like that cannot be allowed to happen. Okay.
Good relation with President Bukele, the best guarantee that this time you won't terminate the temporary.
I have a great relationship with this man. I have the best relationship with him. We've known each other.
He's got a great relationship with, this is just like Putin. He's got a great relationship with Putin, who also pretty much they would never be able to handle the U.S. military. Not if they weren't having spies in it. Trump spies, Russian Trump spies inside of the U.S. military. Outside of that, they would never be able to handle it. But Trump can't get Putin to do a damn thing. He can't be forceful. He can't do any of that. And then you also have even more weaker character on his stage, on the platform. And he can't even get him to return a person that's not even a criminal. Trump doesn't, he's so used to believing his own lies. He doesn't see how weak he actually looks. He doesn't see it himself. He actually believes the bullshit is working.
I've known him since he was a very young man, as I said, very, very young, and I was impressed. I said, look, this guy is, in fact, you sort of look like a teenager. You look like a teenager. I said, what kind of a country is it?
Why is Trump kissing this man's ass? You see that? Why is he kissing his ass? This is ridiculous. This is not even stately. This is not what a diplomat does with this is not how a president acts. I'm not saying you have to be mean but this is not stately. He's not even acting like a statesman here, and this is a meeting about returning a person who was improperly sent to another country to prison, who has never been convicted or charged of a crime in either country. And this is the conversation they're having. Yo.
Mr. President.
He grew up well in the last 5 years.
Do you support the extension for national
I support him. I support him. Go ahead. Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CNN. Low-rated. Which one is that? Well, let me ask Pam. Would you answer that question?
Sure, President.
Pam Bondi on set. Let's go, Pam.
Illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country, and in 2019.
You see that? They just lied. He wasn't illegal in the country.
2 courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country.
Okay. Let me check this out now. Let's go back. I mean, let's see. Is what she's talking about an appellate court? What the hell is? Okay. So what difference does it make in any case? I'm going to check this out. But so an appellate court says it, but another court says no. Which one do you listen to? Which one do you hear? Which one do you respect? They're all operating under the Constitution. Does one have more authority than the other? Let me see here. Why did Pam Bondi say that Garcia was proven to be a gang member in an did I spell that right? Appellate court. I'm not spelling it right, but it doesn't matter. Appellate court, while he has never been charged or convicted of such a crime. Okay. In the USA or El Salvador. Let me see this. Just want to check this out, y'all. Look at this, y'all. She's just flat out lying. Look, this is the first I'm seeing of this. All I did was want to know, like, is this broad lying? Is this Blondina, like, as they say, I don't know what is that Blondina? Who says that? Is that Spanish or Danish or whatever? Is this lady with the blonde hair lying? Let's see.
Attorney General Pam Bondi's assertion that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was proven to be a gang member in an appellate court lacks substantiation from any formal criminal proceedings. Abrego Garcia has never been charged or convicted of gang affiliation in either the United States or El Salvador. Background on the allegations. In 2019, during immigration proceedings, U.S. authorities claimed that Abrego Garcia was affiliated with MS-13. This claim was based on his attire, specifically wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie, a confidential informant's statement alleging his involvement with an MS-13 group in New York, a location where Abrego Garcia has never resided. An immigration judge considered this information sufficient to deny his bond request. However, it's important to note that immigration bond hearings are not criminal trials and do not require the same standard of evidence. No formal adjudication of gang membership occurred in a criminal court. Judicial findings. In April 2025, U.S. District Judge Paula Sinis addressed the government's allegations, stating that they had presented no evidence of Abrego Garcia's membership in MS-13. She described the deportation as wholly lawless, and emphasized that labeling him as a gang member without substantiated evidence placed him at significant risk in El Salvador's detention facilities, where rival gang members are intentionally housed together. Bondi's statement and its implications. Attorney General Bondi's claim appears to rely on internal assessments from agencies like ICE and DHS, rather than on judicial determinations. This reliance on unverified agency reports, without corroborating evidence from criminal proceedings, raises concerns about due process and the potential for mischaracterization. In summary, while allegations were made regarding Abrego Garcia's gang affiliation, they were not substantiated in any court of law. Assertions to the contrary lack legal foundation and highlight the importance of adhering to due process and evidentiary standards.
So basically, what she's saying has never been proven to be true. It has not ever. This is ridiculous. It's just someone can just say it. Oh, and that's it. Oh, well, if you're if you're going to be guilty because someone says something, everyone is in trouble. What about what people said about Trump? People said all kinds of stuff about Trump. Is he guilty? Why is it he can be president if people say all these things? Why is that so? Why is there a different standard? Is the same standard going to be applied to what people say about Pam Bondi or Donald Trump or Elon Musk or anyone else? Is that how things are supposed to work? Look at this. Background on the allegations. During the immigration proceeding, okay, that's not a criminal court, U.S. authorities claimed that Abrego Garcia was affiliated with MS-13. This claim was based on two simple things. His attire, specifically wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie. But how many people wear a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie? The second claim, a confidential informant statement alleging his involvement with MS-13 group in New York, a location where he has never resided. Guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. No, nothing else. Nothing else to it. You wearing a hoodie? You wearing a hoodie? Look at this. I mean, somebody wore Chicago. Does this sound familiar? Trayvon Martin? Does this sound familiar? Hat and hoodie. Do you know how many people are in trouble if this is what they're talking about now? And here's the thing. Watch this. Has a Trump administration official made a statement that anyone who hates the USA will be deported? This is just coming off of the backs of this meeting where they're making these statements. Look at this. This is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know what to tell people, but for me, I think this is very, very bad. They are inching their way up to just throwing anyone that they don't like in detention centers, like flat out.
Yes, a senior Trump administration official has publicly stated that individuals who preach hate for America will face deportation. This declaration has ignited significant debate over its implications for free speech and constitutional rights. Statement by Stephen Miller. On April 14th, 2025, Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy,
yesterday,
appeared on Fox News and was questioned about the pending deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian student at Columbia University accused of supporting Hamas. Miller responded, "Yes, he will, as will anyone who preaches hate for America." He further stated that under the Trump administration, individuals who hate America, who threaten our citizens, who rape, who murder, and who support those who rape and murder would be expelled from the country. Legal and constitutional concerns. This stance has raised alarms among civil liberties organizations and legal experts who argue that such policies may infringe upon First Amendment protections. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, emphasized that expressing dissenting political views, including criticism of U.S. policies, is constitutionally protected speech, regardless of one's immigration status. Furthermore, the Trump administration's actions, such as the arrest and detention of Mahmoud Khalil without a warrant and the revocation of his green card, have prompted lawsuits alleging violations of constitutional rights. These legal challenges contend that the administration's policies amount to an ideological deportation policy, targeting individuals based on their political beliefs. Summary. Stephen Miller's statement reflects the Trump administration's intent to deport individuals who express anti-American sentiments. Legal experts warn that such actions may violate First Amendment rights and set a dangerous precedent for suppressing dissent. Ongoing legal challenges aim to address and rectify potential constitutional infringements resulting from these policies.
Now, check this out. Trump himself has made statements regarding hate groups and groups that are classified as hate groups or terror groups. Let me just pull this up. Has Trump himself made statements regarding organizations which are classified as hate groups and described them as good people or persons who have committed violence? I mean, this is ridiculous because, Jan 6. Let me see something. Let me see what this pulls up real quick. Yes, former President Donald Trump has made statements that have been interpreted as defending or downplaying the actions of individuals associated with hate groups or those involved in violent incidents. Let me just let folks hear this.
Yes, former President Donald Trump has made statements that have been interpreted as defending or downplaying the actions of individuals associated with hate groups or those involved in violent incidents. Charlottesville and the very fine people comment. In August 2017, following the violent Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, which included white nationalists, neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan members, President Trump stated, "You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides." He later clarified that he was referring to individuals protesting the removal of a Confederate statue, not the white supremacists. However, critics argued that his remarks suggested a moral equivalence between hate groups and those opposing them. Legal actions and controversies. Trump's comments have led to legal and public controversies. For instance, the exonerated Central Park Five filed a defamation lawsuit against him, alleging that he made false and defamatory statements about them during a 2024 presidential debate. A federal judge recently denied Trump's motion to dismiss the case. Summary. Trump's statements following the Charlottesville rally were widely criticized for appearing to equate white supremacists with counter-protesters. He has faced legal challenges related to past remarks about individuals involved in high-profile cases. These incidents have contributed to ongoing debates about his stance on hate groups and violence.
So, this is the issue. Trump seems to have a double standard, at the very least. And it's not that I myself do not agree with, I don't think it's wise to associate with organizations that are listed as terrorist or hate groups. I don't think that's wise. I don't think that's a clever thing to do for an activist. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's my view. It doesn't matter if it's if it's classified as terror or if it's classified as hate groups. I don't believe that is wise. And I would advise people to stay at a distance from all and be very clear, right? To not appear as if you're defending their actions, Now, you might have some sort of feeling that they have a purpose, some genuine purpose, or some you may want to debate the legalities of it, but there's ways to do it without making yourself seem like you are okay with them, with these groups and the way they go about doing things. Sometimes, it's just my advice. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. It's just my advice. Now, I'm just saying that to say that I don't agree with Hamas. I don't agree with Hezbollah. I don't agree with their approach. I don't agree with Iran's approach towards dealing with Israel. And I also don't agree with Israel's approach towards dealing with Palestinians. I think the situation is totally fucked up on all sides. And I don't agree with Putin's approach to supporting Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran. I don't believe that was helpful for Palestinian people. Palestinians have also asked people to stop interfering from the outside. They were talking about Iran, but people didn't follow that. That came about it sometimes. Now, so that's why I hold back. I also believe that if you attack Israel, even if they're not right, it's not. If you want to help Palestinian people, acting out in violence is likely not going to help them. That's my view. So I don't associate with these types of groups, myself. And it's the same thing in the United States. I'm not going to deal with any hate groups and things like that. I think they're ridiculous, and they often are not even maybe the wisest or most clever people, and often may not just even recognize the stupidity of what they're doing a lot of times, and so that's my view. But here you have Trump. He actually seems to not want to apply the same standard that he practices towards others. I mean, he has an opinion. People didn't like his opinion. People were outraged about his opinion. He didn't condemn. They ask him questions all the time about hate groups, and he always sidesteps the hate groups. Well, there it is. Everyone doesn't always, believe that Hamas is a terror organization. Everyone on the earth doesn't agree with these, and it's just true. Every country does not agree that they're terrorists. So that's the issue. That's something that can be debated. That's something that can be discussed. But claiming that a person having that debate or being a part of that debate is the same thing as being aligned with them, or that's different. And I think Trump, I'm not saying what he's doing is right, and I'm not saying what the other kid did is so smart either. But, this is all within the realm of the Constitution. This is all within the realm of a higher purpose, to have dialogue, at the very least, even if there's disagreement. And Trump doesn't seem to like to go about that things that way. But in any case, let's hear some more Pam Bondi's lies.
Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
That's not what the Supreme Court ruled. Let's see here. What did the Supreme Court rule exactly regarding the USA facilitating Garcia's return? Let me just check this out. Okay. So let me pull this over here. On April 10th, let's see here. Okay, it's still dragging and pulling information out. This was April 10th. You see how fast things move with this. All right, let me see. It's still pulling up info. Okay, here we go. Now we got it. Let's see what it says.
On April 10th, 2025, the US Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. The court acknowledged that Garcia had been granted withholding of removal status, which prohibited his deportation to El Salvador, making his removal illegal. The court's decision emphasized that the administration must ensure Garcia's case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. However, the court stopped short of ordering his immediate return, deferring to the executive branch in matters of foreign affairs. Justice Sotomayor, joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson, noted that the ruling did not mandate Garcia's immediate return to the United States. The administration has interpreted the ruling as requiring them to facilitate his return only if El Salvador chooses to release him. Despite the Supreme Court's directive, El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele has refused to return Garcia, stating he cannot release a terrorist into the United States. The Trump administration has contended that it has fulfilled its obligation by addressing domestic barriers and that foreign relations fall solely under the president's purview, with courts unable to compel diplomatic actions. This situation has raised concerns about the judiciary's ability to enforce its rulings and the administration's compliance with judicial directives.
How do you all feel about him being called a terrorist without any charges, without being convicted of any crime, without even having any charges of the such? How do y'all feel about that? I mean, apparently they're sliding through the court's ruling and and agreed. The court did not. They stopped short of saying that he must be returned. They allow some leeway here, but in my view, it seems like, it is up to the administration, but what is it that, so in other words, it seems like the Trump administration is negotiating this here. They're saying that, okay, we want him to build more prisons for us, so therefore we won't press him to return that resident of Maryland, even though he hasn't been convicted of a crime, and even though he hasn't been even convicted of terrorism. He hasn't even been charged of terrorism. He's not been charged of any crime. And, so is that okay to do? How many of you all think that that is going to have some, other ramifications on American citizens anywhere else? Do you think this is going to help Americans somehow? Like, is this going to clean up crime in the U.S.? How is this going to help the United States and voters right now? I don't see. To me, it seems like they're more embarrassed and looking for an excuse to justify it, and that's it. It doesn't seem like they're interested in doing what's right or admitting that they even made a mistake from the beginning. It was unlawful to remove him from the United States in the way that they did. Where's justice going to be had in that?
And you are doing a great job. Thank you, Pam. Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Could you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal.
He is not an illegal alien. I don't understand why they keep doing this, but he's not an illegal alien.
No, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is not considered an illegal alien in the United States. He was granted withholding of removal status, which is a form of protection that prevents him from being deported to El Salvador due to the risk of harm or persecution there. This status was given to him based on his fear of returning to El Salvador. Despite this protection, Garcia was mistakenly deported to El Salvador in 2024. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the Trump administration must facilitate his return, as his deportation violated U.S. law, particularly his protected status. Therefore, he is legally in the US under this protection, and his deportation was deemed an error.
Law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA. So it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So we had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
a
Court is
penalty
asking
to get
to.
it back?
And what was the ruling?
Basically, what they're saying is that if you're ever contacted by any authority in the United States and any claim of you being part of a gang or just a claim itself, it doesn't have to be doesn't have to be proof. All a person has to do is say. That's it. This is the standard that they are setting.
In the Supreme Court, Steve, was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it for the court can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo liberaría, Presidente
Can
Bukele?
President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed you're not suggesting that I'll smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States? Well, I'm supposed you're not suggesting that I'll smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always
How, you see, he has never been convicted of a crime in El Salvador. He's never been convicted of a crime in the U.S. He's never been charged of a crime in El Salvador. He's never been charged of a crime in the U.S. So what is he talking about? You don't even know if he is a criminal because your country has not even charged him with a crime. Your country has presented no evidence of him committing a crime. So anybody can be a terrorist just by word now.
How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you could release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to.
So understand something. There's two statesmen here talking about an individual that has never been charged of a crime, never been convicted of a crime in either of their nations. And they're both sitting there calling him a terrorist. That's what's going on right here.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people.
Well, it would be nice if you could prove It would be nice if the man had due process. That would be nice. That would be very nice. But that would also be lawful due process, because it was unlawful for you to remove him from where he was already. That was deemed unlawful. You see, by the courts, the same courts that he's claiming he won a case with.
Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people back to.
He was not illegally in the United States and returned. That's the problem, too. At one point, you might be able to say he was illegal, but he actually went and applied for a stay, and he was granted that stay legally. After that, you can no longer go back and say he was illegal. You know, I mean, it's almost like saying that you don't recognize that El Salvador is a pretty harsh place to live. Even the citizens are saying that themselves. So it's really weird. It's not weird. You could expect it from these folks. They're not going to take accountability for the acts that they did, which were illegal. But they're asking accountability from someone else.
Their country of origin, except for Venezuela.
A person who's never been convicted of a crime.
That wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy.
But when he sent the man to El Salvador, that was not foreign policy. That's the problem. You might be able to argue that the president of El Salvador is conducting some foreign policy, but it wasn't Trump. That's not Trump. When you illegally remove someone, that's not foreign policy.
Policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on your first lunch 2 days ago.
How long do we have to answer this question from you? Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
Okay, so it's an act of foreign policy, but it was a mistake. Listen to this. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Anyway, I'm going to go to the next story. I'm sorry, but listen to this.
Yes, when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was detained and deported to El Salvador, it can be considered an act influenced by foreign policy, although it was a mistake under US law. The deportation was a diplomatic decision influenced by the US government's actions and agreements with El Salvador. The Trump administration had been pushing for stricter immigration policies, including agreements with countries like El Salvador to accept deportees. However, Garcia was wrongfully deported despite having legal protection, withholding of removal status, preventing his deportation. While the actual deportation was a legal error, the broader context involves foreign policy, as the US regularly coordinates with foreign governments on immigration enforcement, including the repatriation of individuals to their home countries. These diplomatic relations influence the way deportations are handled, and in this case, it was tied to US-El Salvador relations, particularly regarding immigration enforcement and deportation agreements. Ultimately, Garcia's deportation was part of the ongoing international practice of repatriating individuals, but it was a mistake that involved legal missteps within the US system.
Yeah, so, this is what they're saying. This is what it's about. I'm sure folks can go see this, and But in any case, there's some exciting news. Bernie Sanders, I just wanted to go out on a bang and check out some of this regarding Bernie Sanders here. And let's see what that looks like.
Bloomberg actually crunched the numbers.
Oh, wait a second. This is not it. Let's see. Let's go right to this one.
American dream. Congress. Thousand. Now, whatever experience and background you have, you are qualified. It is needed in politics and government today. You all have the qualifications to run for office.
This is Salt Lake City.
Please really think about it. We have to contest every single race up and down the ballot, every county in Utah. We cannot let Republicans run for any seat unopposed. We can donate, volunteer, and please get involved with local politics and nonprofits. And tonight I have a huge ask for you. Tonight, before you leave, please, if you haven't signed the referendum to protect Utah workers, there are circulators with clipboards. There's about 50 circulators here. Take a moment. If you haven't signed, find a circulator with this clipboard and sign the referendum to repeal HB 267. And
okay, they say
together,
that this Salt Lake City rally,
we can reclaim the American dream, and not the billionaire version, the people's version, a future worthy.
they're actually saying that there was 20,000 people here at this rally just yesterday, and then there was 4,000 people apparently waiting outside.
Senators Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez held a rally at the John M. Huntsman Center in Salt Lake City, Utah, on April 13th, 2025, as part of their Fighting Oligarchy tour. The event drew a crowd of approximately 20,000 attendees, with an additional 4,000 people gathered outside the arena. This turnout was notable given Utah's traditionally conservative political landscape, highlighting the broad appeal of Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez's message. The rally was one of several large-scale events on their tour, which has included crowds of up to 36,000 in Los Angeles and 34,000 in Denver. For a visual representation of the Salt Lake City rally,
dreams,
you can view a
children,
photo from the
planet.
event
And you
here.
all give me hope. Look at this turnout. This is incredible. You give me fire. And we're just getting started because Utah is about to become the battleground state of the future. So when I say Utah, you say Blue-Taw. Utah. Utah. One more, Utah. So many underestimate us and underestimate our states. But as a 5'2" woman, I know what it's like to be underestimated. I know what it's like when people tell you that your dream is too big and impossible. But when they say change in Utah is impossible, we say, watch us. And now, we're going to hang tight because in just a few minutes, we will be welcoming Bernie and AOC up to.
That's who I want to actually see. Not to cut the young lady off, but let's see here. Let's see if we can get this.
She spoke truth to power, and she won. Utah, let's make some noise for the one, the only, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. to change this country? Good, because it starts in places like Salt Lake City. Thank you. It is incredible to be here tonight with you all.
You know,
I love
the thing about Cortez is she inspires young women. I can see that. And, that's a powerful thing to young people in general. That's a very powerful thing. I just hope that young people really do rally behind their country. I think that's the key to the U.S. I'm not dissing older people, but I'm in dialogue politically with a lot of different people daily. And sometimes old activists get stuck in their thinking and don't grow past it. And times do change. And, I just like to see politicians that inspire the youth to be active in voting. And I think having a young activist like Cortez does that. Not to say that she's that young either, but, and I think Bernie Sanders, he deserves a lot of respect for taking these tours with her, for working with a young person, a young politician, because a lot of times they try to dismiss young people from being part of the political process. A lot of times you see activists that exist, young people exist in activism, but a lot of times not in politics. And I think that's a fatal error for young people too. I think more young people need to be a part of the political process in terms of running for office, in terms of knowing the Constitution, knowing the law, writing laws. You don't have to be a lawyer to do it. You could learn to be a lawyer. You see what I mean? You don't actually have to be a lawyer. Not all politicians are lawyers. It could help, but to be honest, this is civil society. So knowing the Constitution and knowing constitutional law should be something most citizens are concerned with, and residents.
You too. We're actually seeing that our numbers tonight looks like we've got 20,000 people here tonight. We've got 5,000 people outside who just want to be part of this moment. So thank you all so much. And I want to thank each and every one of you for taking and making the effort of being here today, for taking the time out of your days in order to show up here tonight. So thank you. My name is Alexandria. Some of you may know me as AOC. And we are all here together because we share the frustration and heartache that comes from watching those in power actively tear down or refuse to fight for everyday working Americans like us. And we're here because an extreme concentration of power, greed, and corruption is taking over this country like never before. Oligarchy in America. And we must acknowledge the terrifying moment that we are in right now, and that what we are hearing and seeing with our own eyes is, in fact, happening. We are watching as our neighbors, students, and friends are being fired, targeted, and disappeared. It is real. People we love are being targeted and harassed for being LGBTQ. Our coworkers, U.S. citizens and immigrants alike, are being disappeared off the street. Educators are being fired for teaching American history accurately, and activists are being detained with no charge or evidence for using their First Amendment rights. Especially especially if they are using them to try to end the war in Gaza. In fact, the Trump administration admits that it has jailed a young father and husband, Mahmoud Khalil, without any evidence or charge of a crime. And they admit that they have thrown him in a cell thousands of miles away from his family in New York because he attended a protest, and are detaining him for the content of his speech and nothing more than that. But let's be clear, Utah. Donald Trump's detention of Mahmoud Khalil for his speech is anti-American. And we demand his release, along with the release of Rumeisa Ozturk, who he is also jailing for writing an op-ed in her school paper. And we demand this, Utah, because we do have power in this moment.
These kind of issues about freedom of speech, there's an opportunity on both sides, whether you disagree or agree with what someone's opinion is. That's not the same as stopping someone from moving on with their life or living out their daily life. Having an opinion is not an action. You're not hindering someone. You're actually, opening up a dialogue. So it's okay to disagree. You don't always have to agree. But the importance of being able to have a dialogue about issues is most supreme if you want to get to basically a stronger understanding, right? Now, and so people need to be very clear about this and how they approach it. You don't have to like a person's opinion to dialogue with them respectfully. And if you're afraid of someone's opinion, I would think that there's something weak about your ability to argue your points. I think it's just that simple. Now, but in
all
any
of
case,
us do, you do, and everyday people do. And it will never be just institutions and officials alone that uphold our democracy. It will always be the people, the masses, who refuse to comply with authoritarian regimes, who are the last and strongest defense of our country and our freedoms. Because we know that a better world is possible, and we are willing to do something about it. But to get there, we must be honest about how we got to where we are right now. Because this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It has been a long time coming. The destruction of our rights and our democracy is directly tied to the growing and extreme wealth inequality that has been building in America for years. It is not a coincidence that billionaires like Elon Musk dumped billions into this election to elect Donald Trump. And he sure isn't doing it out of charity. For years, we have known that our political system has slowly but surely become dominated by big money and billionaires. And time after time, we've seen how our government and laws are more responsive to lobbyists than to the will of everyday people. And we also know that the agenda of dark money to keep wages low and loot our public goods to give to the rich is deeply unpopular with the people of all parties. But just look at what Republicans have been quietly doing in Congress, voting to advance cuts on hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid and veterans benefits so that they can take that money and give it to the billionaires in the form of tax cuts and sweetheart deals to billionaires like in companies like SpaceX. And you know who from Utah voted for that, by the way? Both of your senators, Mike Lee and John Curtis. And
Wow.
Salt Lake City's own House members, Blake Moore and Celeste Malloy.
She is going straight at them, and there is an election coming. I'm sure a couple of them are up for election. This is wild. That's so cool. I'm amazed.
And they know, Utah, that that's not what you want.
Even though I'm not too sure if the U.S. is going to make it to the next to these midterms, because shit is really bad right now, and I'm pretty sure Trump is willing to do anything to destroy the U.S. to make it so there can't be any elections ever again. But I have a little faith when I listen to AOC, and she is right on point politically by identifying the perpetrators to do something about it democratically. Yes, we still need to go down that avenue as long as it exists, but we don't need to give up, every other avenue to defend ourselves either.
They know that it is deeply unpopular. They know that it hurts working families from Utah. But they know that they are not there to serve the working class. They are there to serve themselves and the billionaires who paid them. But they also know that the only chance they have to get away with such an unpopular agenda is to stoke deep divisions along race, identity, and culture to keep us fighting and distracted from one another. And this has been the big money playbook, not just now, not just today, but it has been for decades. And that is why Donald Trump is not an aberration. He is the logical, inevitable conclusion of an American political system dominated by corporate and dark money. And if we are to defeat him, Utah, we must defeat the system that created him. We are at a crossroads in America. We can either have extreme and growing wealth inequality with the toxic division and corruption that it requires to survive, or we can have a fair economy for working people along with the democracy and freedoms that uphold it. Oligarchy or democracy, but we cannot have both. I grew up in a working class family. My mom cleaned houses, and my dad worked to build a small business. My parents worked themselves to the bone so that my brother and I could just have a shot. The American dream. And for a moment there, it looked like we were going to make it. We had a home, bills were getting a little less stressful to pay, and I was doing well in school. But what may have looked like a modest life to others was a dream come true for us. But suddenly, when I was a teenager, my dad was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. And after a long fight, we lost him. And he actually passed away in September of 2008, just as the economy crashed in the Great Recession and millions of jobs across this country vanished. It felt like the world of our family fell apart as the larger world was falling apart too. And overnight, my mom was left to figure out how to provide for 2 kids by herself, put them through school, keep our house, pay off my dad's medical bills, all on a house cleaner salary. And that's how I became a waitress, because it was
millions of innocent working families who paid the price while the billionaires and thieves who defrauded our financial system got off richer than ever before. And not a single one of them went to jail. And you know what, Utah? That is the story that Republicans mock. Not mine, but all of ours, when they say that a waitress or working person is unqualified to serve in Congress.
You know, when I listen to AOC, and I don't listen to her speeches often, I'm a fan of hers, but I read more about it. I know a lot about her policies and her views, but I don't necessarily watch a lot of her speeches. And this is one of the few. And when I look at her, when I listen to her speak and articulate her message, I actually hear someone that could definitely be a great leader. And that's an understatement. I don't mean she's already a leader, but I don't mean that. I mean on definitely the national stage, as a president, as a vice president, you know, this kind of thing. But, you know, part of me, which is you know, very aware of how democracy has usually turned out in the United States, and that's always appeasing the right, always having to find the middle ground again, even though they hate you and hate everything about you and want you dead, right? For being she's LGBT, right? Or she's a gay woman, right? So they hate her for that, for being who she is. But when I listen to her, I don't see a gay woman. I don't think about that. I'm listening to what she's talking about every day, the way she talks about everyday people and being American. You don't have to be, you know, being American means understanding what are Americans, what comprises an American. And that's one of your rights. So when I hear her, I don't hear her talking about LGBT. I hear her talking about everybody, things that should concern everybody. And her message is on point. Fight the oligarchy. I hope Americans take that message serious. And the key to the future of the U.S. is people believing that it lies in their hands first, the everyday person. If you want this message to work, fight for this message. Stand behind this message. Because if you don't, no message will work. If you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. So, you know, I'm a little conflicted because I've never seen the United States not pander to the right. But I know damn well sure that this lady is not really on the left. She's on what most of the Western world calls center politics, healthcare, education, fair housing. That's center politics. Only in the U.S. is this looked at as left or extreme left. You know, so let me just call out on that note. It's been a minute, but I appreciate everybody. You know, once again, I think YouTube has been blocking, you know, trying to shadow ban me for some time now. You know, I don't know for what or why, but it's been going on for some months, maybe like 5-6 months now. So, but again, I'm not here for, you know, I know I'm not going to get everybody, but I also know that the people that do come through in the future, they will appreciate the message. And I do know the people that do listen regularly appreciate the message. But I also know the timing is also, you know, I come at a different time because I'm in the EU. But and most of the, you know, the people that I do speak to are actually in the U.S. But nonetheless, I'm appreciative of everybody. And I'm going to continue doing what I do. I would advise Americans to take her message very seriously. And think about what everybody needs. Does everybody need health care? Does everybody need fair housing? Does everybody need access to education, primary and higher education. Is that access doesn't mean you go. It just means if you want to, you can without hassles. You see, access to health care, that doesn't mean you can't. You can't, if you're a millionaire, you can't fly off to Switzerland and get some health care. You can still do that if you're a millionaire, but should everybody have access to health care in the first place, at least inside of the country, right? So I would encourage Americans to think about those basic things and stop thinking about who somebody's effing. Stop thinking about what somebody's religion is. Stop thinking about what somebody's color is. Of course, when you're dealing with discrimination, you have to talk about these things. When you acknowledge discrimination, you have to talk about these things. But they don't have to be turn into phobias. You don't have to be afraid of these things. And I hope Americans can understand live and let live. You allowing someone else to be themselves, as long as they're not harming somebody else, gives you the right to be yourself, as long as you're not harming anybody else. So, on that note, I'm out. I appreciate everybody. Catch up with y'all soon, maybe later on today once folks are more active online, the Americans. Peace, y'all. I appreciate it once again. Peace, Bev. Peace, Donnie. Peace, Drea. Peace, Shaka. Everybody else that comes through. One.